The studio was buzzing. Lights flared, cameras rolled, and every seat in the audience was filled. It was the highly anticipated America Now debate special, a one-night-only televised event bringing together unlikely voices. And tonight, no clash was more electrifying than the one about to unfold between Donald Trump and Denzel Washington. Trump leaned back in his chair, adjusting his red tie as if preparing for battle. Across from him, Denzel sat calm, eyes sharp, posture steady, like a man who had nothing to prove but knew everything could be taken the wrong way. Then, the moment detonated. "You know, I've won a lot," Trump began, voice smug. "Billions in business. The presidency. But some people, Hollywood people, get trophies just for having the right opinions." The moderator blinked. The room stiffened. Trump turned toward Denzel, locking eyes. "Tell me, Denzel, how many of those awards were given to you because of your talent, and how many because you say what the elite wants to hear?" A ripple spread through the crowd like cold water spilled across a hot surface. Cameras zoomed in on Denzel's face. He didn't blink. He didn't twitch. He simply raised his eyebrows slightly, as if Trump's provocation was more amusing than offensive. The moderator looked panicked. "Mr. Trump, are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting. I'm saying it out loud," Trump cut in. "He's a good actor, sure. But come on. The Academy, the Emmys, the Golden Globes, they love when someone like Denzel plays nice with the narrative." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, murmurs. Online, Twitter exploded. "Trump just accused Denzel of being a token," one trending post read. Screens across the country lit up. Clips were already being spliced and posted with captions like, "Trump slams Denzel, but watch his face." But Denzel didn't flinch. He leaned forward slowly, his hands clasped on the table. "Donald," he said with that signature calm, baritone voice, "you've spent your life measuring power in applause, buildings, and cameras. I've spent mine telling stories of pain, resilience, and truth. The difference between us? I earned my stage, you bought yours." The room held its breath. And just like that, the temperature dropped 10 degrees in the studio. Trump shifted in his seat, lips curled into a grin that barely masked the irritation burning behind his eyes. He wasn't used to being countered with such precision, especially not by someone who didn't raise their voice. "So now you're a preacher too, huh?" Trump scoffed, pointing at Denzel. "You actors, you think you're philosophers when a camera's rolling and martinis are flowing. You ever build something real? Create jobs? Face consequences?" Denzel blinked once. Just once. Trump continued, his voice rising. "You made a career out of playing victims. Police brutality, racism, injustice, always the same song. Maybe that's the real performance, Denzel. Maybe people like you don't want solutions. Maybe you need the struggle to stay relevant." The audience gasped. A few clapped, uncertain whether they should. The host opened his mouth, then closed it again. Denzel didn't move. Instead, he slowly turned toward Trump, his hands still folded, his voice low, measured and deadly. "Donald," he said, "you think playing a man who fights for dignity is a performance? Try sitting across from a grieving mother in South Central LA after her son was shot for wearing the wrong color hoodie. Try walking through Harlem, not with cameras, but in silence, listening to what this country forgot." Trump rolled his eyes. "Spare me the sermon." But Denzel leaned in now, voice tightening like a coiled spring. "You inherited towers. I inherited trauma. My father didn't hand me real estate, he handed me work ethic. And those victim roles you talk about? They reflect a reality you've never touched." The audience was frozen. Even the camera crew paused. "Let me tell you something about relevance, Mr. Trump," Denzel added, his eyes locked. "Relevance isn't shouting into a microphone. It's standing for something when the world tells you to sit down. And I never sat down." For the first time all night, Trump didn't answer. In homes across America, people leaned in closer. Phones lit up again. Denzel just buried him in 3 sentences. One tweet read, "#NeverSatDown" began trending instantly. Trump finally sat back in his chair, but not in defeat. He was reloading. "Oh please," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "This is why people can't stand Hollywood anymore. Everything's a lecture. You want to win an Oscar for outrage? Go ahead. But don't pretend you're doing real work. You're just another actor pushing the woke agenda." The audience stirred, half cheering, half jeering. A tension split the room. Denzel didn't blink. Instead, he stood. The move was subtle, but in that moment it felt seismic. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "I'm not here to win applause," Denzel said, voice calm but cutting. "I'm here because the same kid who watched me in Remember the Titans just watched his school lose funding, again. The same mother who told me John Q gave her hope can't afford insulin for her child." He looked directly at the camera now. "And when someone says that's just a woke agenda, that's not just ignorance. That's cowardice dressed as comedy." The room was silent. Even Trump didn't interrupt. Denzel turned back to him. "You want to talk real work? Try waking up every day and choosing truth over power. Try making art that shakes people awake. That's not Hollywood, Mr. Trump. That's humanity." The silence was thunderous. A woman in the audience stood up and clapped, alone, at first. Then another. And another. Until the whole room was on its feet. Trump looked stunned. Not by Denzel's words, but by the fact that no punchline could match them. Trump leaned forward, tapping his fingers on the desk. His smile was thin, forced. "Let me ask you something, Denzel," he said. "If your movies were so important, why didn't they stop crime? Why didn't they fix poverty? You've been acting for 40 years, and guess what? Nothing's changed. Maybe it's time to admit you're just another millionaire pretending to be a martyr." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Even the host raised an eyebrow. Denzel didn't respond right away. He slowly walked to the edge of the stage, where the spotlight hit just enough to cast a long shadow. "You think art doesn't change the world," he said, voice steady. "Then explain why a single speech from Malcolm X still rattles cages. Why a film like Glory is taught in military academies. Why fences made fathers pick up the phone they hadn't touched in years." He looked at Trump again, unblinking. "You see entertainment. I see evidence. Change doesn't always come with sirens, Mr. Trump. Sometimes it comes in the quiet decision of a man choosing to stay. A mother daring to hope. A system being questioned, not with guns, but with stories." The room was frozen. Trump opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. "And as for poverty?" Denzel added, "I don't pretend to be a savior. But I'll never be the one who called the people struggling in this country losers. That was you." A deep murmur spread through the crowd. Whispers turned to headshakes. People weren't just reacting now, they were remembering. Trump straightened his tie and leaned into the microphone with a cocky grin. "Let's not forget," he said, "I've donated millions, millions. To black colleges, to urban redevelopment zones. I passed criminal justice reform. I worked with people like Kanye and Ice Cube. You act like I've never done a thing. You just play heroes. I create change." A few scattered claps came from the right side of the audience. Fox News was already cutting a headline. Denzel's laugh was short and sharp, cold. "You cut checks, Mr. Trump. That's not change. That's clearance." The room shifted. "Let me ask you something," Denzel continued. "Why is it, every time someone brings up accountability, you throw a check in the air and expect us to dance for it? You name-drop black artists like they're ornaments on a tree you built. You claim prison reform, but forget to mention the cages. You fund buildings, but never walk through them. You speak about justice, but only when it boosts ratings." Trump tried to interject. "Excuse me." Denzel raised a finger. I'm not finished. The silence was thunderous. You don't get to throw money at wounds and then brag that you're a doctor. You don't get to stand on the shoulders of black culture while calling our neighborhoods disasters. You didn't build bridges. You bought sound bites. People in the studio began nodding. Some even stood. And if you think a headline equals healing, Denzel said, turning slightly to the camera, then you're not just out of touch. You're part of the damage. Trump leaned back with a smirk, arms folded like a man who thought he'd found a crack in the armor. You love to preach, Denzel. But weren't you the one who said, success doesn't mean you owe anyone anything? Funny how now you're trying to act like some self-appointed savior of the people. You've lived in mansions, flown private jets, worn $1,000 suits. You're not one of them, you're one of us. He leaned forward, his voice laced with venom. So save the speech, Hollywood man. You're as elite as they come. The audience tensed. A few murmurs, some uneasy laughter. Denzel didn't blink. I said that, yeah, he replied. But context matters, doesn't it? He stepped closer, eyes locked on Trump's. What I said was, success doesn't mean you owe anyone anything, unless you've built that success stepping on the backs of others. You see the difference? He didn't wait for a response. I didn't bankrupt contractors. I didn't evict tenants during a pandemic. I didn't say, grab them by anything. I didn't sell hope in one hand while pocketing profit with the other. Trump's jaw clenched, but he stayed quiet. Denzel's voice grew firmer. I've made mistakes. I've stumbled. But I didn't make a brand out of division. I didn't feed the fire just to stay relevant. And I sure as hell never mocked a soldier's sacrifice or a disabled reporter on national TV. You could hear a pin drop. And by the way, he added, turning slightly to face the crowd, there's nothing wrong with wearing a $1,000 suit, as long as you can look in the mirror and know you earned it. A few claps. Then more. Then a wave. Trump stared ahead, lips pressed tight. This wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a reckoning. Trump slammed his palm on the podium, eyes blazing. This is what's wrong with America. You people, Hollywood, the elites, you act like you care, but where were you when crime skyrocketed? When fentanyl flooded our streets? When schools became war zones? He turned, pacing now. You sit on stages, give your little speeches, and call it activism. But when I went to East Palestine, Ohio, where were you? When I visited the border, where were you? He spun on Denzel, voice rising. You only show up when there's a camera. Denzel didn't flinch. Instead, he let the storm pass, and then answered in a voice that didn't need to shout. I've been to the prisons you ignore. I've sat with mothers who've buried their sons because no one cared enough to change the system. I've funded schools, built scholarships, and shown up without a press release. He stepped forward, calm but resolute. And let's be clear, you didn't go to those places for them. You went for you. For the photo. For the narrative. For the clip that plays on the evening news. The crowd murmured. Some nodded. Trump tried to speak again, but Denzel kept going. You don't get to question where I've been while you've been on stages calling Mexicans rapists and mocking black neighborhoods as hellscapes. You didn't speak truth to power, you were power mocking the truth. Now the audience was with him. And by the way, Denzel added, eyes locked on Trump, real change doesn't come with a red hat. It comes when you walk into pain without needing applause. A heavy silence blanketed the room. Trump's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Because in that moment, there was nothing to say. Trump scoffed and leaned toward the mic, his tone dripping with mockery. You've played heroes on screen, Denzel. Soldiers, leaders, saints. But that's all it is, acting. Don't mistake applause for truth. You read scripts, take direction, and hit your marks. That doesn't make you a moral compass. He waved his hand dismissively. You pretend to be brave, to be noble, but when the lights go out, what are you really? Just another actor paid to look powerful. There were a few awkward chuckles in the crowd, nervous, unsure. Denzel stepped forward slowly. He didn't rush. He didn't flinch. He looked directly at Trump and then turned to the audience. Let me tell you something about pretending, Mr. Trump. His voice was even, but steel ran underneath it. Yes, I've played roles. I've worn uniforms that weren't mine. I've stood in courtrooms that were sets. But you? You played president. The room gasped. You played it like a reality show. You made policy a punchline. You made pain into propaganda. You turned a sacred office into a stage, and lives into ratings. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. When I play a role, I know I'm pretending. I study, I research, I try to honor the real people behind the stories. But you? You believed your own fiction. And that's the difference. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Wow." Denzel glanced back at Trump. You call what I do acting? Then maybe it's time you learned the difference between performance and purpose. The crowd exploded. Standing ovation. And for the first time in the entire exchange, Trump blinked. Just once. But enough to see he felt it. Trump paced slightly, then pointed a firm finger at Denzel. You know what this is, folks? This is Hollywood trying to lecture hardworking Americans again. He gets paid millions to pretend, lives behind gates, rides in private jets, and then shows up to tell you about your struggle. The crowd stirred, some murmured in agreement. Trump pushed forward, sensing momentum. He's not one of you. He's not in the grocery lines. He doesn't see your bills. He doesn't know what it's like to be forgotten. I do. I ran because you were ignored. He talks about pain, I felt it with you. Denzel took a long breath. Then stepped forward. You done, Donald? He didn't wait for an answer. I've walked through neighborhoods the media wouldn't touch. I've sat with mothers who lost sons to a system they never built. I've spoken in prisons, in shelters, in schools with crumbling ceilings. And I didn't do it for a photo op, I did it because I'm from there. The crowd hushed. I've stood in the back of church basements and heard children ask if they'll live to be 20. I've walked into homes where heat didn't work in winter. So don't talk to me about distance. Denzel looked at Trump dead in the eyes. You flew to rallies. I rode buses to broken zip codes. You signed hats. I signed death certificates. There was a chilling silence. Then, applause. Not wild. But deep. Earnest. And Trump, for the first time, didn't speak back immediately. Trump squared his shoulders and raised his voice. You talk about pain, Denzel. You talk about struggle. But every time you go on air, every time you give these speeches, you divide this country. You stoke flames. You draw lines. You make people choose sides. He jabbed a finger toward the crowd. You don't heal. You accuse. You don't lead. You lecture. You're part of the reason we're so damn broken. Gasps echoed in the studio. Even some of Trump's supporters weren't sure if he'd gone too far. Denzel stepped forward. His expression wasn't anger, it was something quieter. Something heavier. Divide the country? His voice was low. You think the country was united before we spoke up? He turned to the audience, scanning each row. Where was the unity when black families were redlined out of homes? When schools were segregated? When my father was called a boy by men half his age? He looked back at Trump. You confuse silence with unity. But silence isn't peace. It's fear. It's survival. Denzel paused. He took a breath. You say I accuse. No, Mr. Trump. I remember. I witness. I refuse to forget. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe it's truth knocking on your front door. The studio was still. Not a whisper. Not a breath. Then, from the back of the crowd, a single clap. Then another. Then a wave. Within seconds, the room was on its feet. Trump's mouth opened, but no words came. Denzel stood firm. Solid. Unshaken, the host leaned forward, his cue cards limp in hand. Cameras scanned the crowd, silent, breathless, unsure if they had just witnessed a debate or a reckoning. Denzel adjusted his mic and looked not at Trump, but straight into the camera. To everyone watching, this isn't about red or blue. It's not about left or right. It's about the truth. And the truth doesn't need permission to speak. He raised his hand slightly, palm open. I don't stand here as an actor. I stand as a father. As a man who's seen too many graves dug too early. I'm not here to impress. I'm here to remind. A pause. You can build towers, but if your foundation is fear, they'll fall. You can wear the title of president, but if you lead with division, history will forget your name. Trump scoffed quietly, but didn't speak. Denzel turned to him, calm, piercing. You may own buildings. You may sign checks. But you don't own us. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner this country can finally breathe. He stepped back. The crowd didn't erupt. It rose, like a tide. A slow, powerful wave of standing people, some with tears, others with fists over hearts. Trump blinked. Stared. Then turned away. As the lights dimmed, Denzel whispered one final line, low, but caught by the mic. Not your enemy. Just the mirror. Fade to black. That he didn't raise his voice. He didn't call for applause. Denzel Washington simply told the truth. In a world flooded with noise, spin, and ego, sometimes the most powerful statement is silence that follows a truth too sharp to ignore. This wasn't just a clash between a movie star and a former president. It was a mirror, held up to power. And in that reflection, some saw strength. Others saw fear. But everyone saw something they won't forget. Movie camera, if this shook you, let it be known. Drop a comment. Share the moment. And remember. Truth doesn't shout. It stands.